Alright, this is going to be a review of Acolyte of Chayula for Period 2. Now, this will be in the context of the 0.2 patch. For reference, we have Endgame such as Expedition, Ritual, Breach, and Delirium. Firstly, the good. These two nodes, I think, are very good. Having a class that can scale mana, interestingly, is great for Period 2. Now, giving mana leech based on damage types as well as physical damage doesn't specify attack leech. However, the implication currently is that there is no form of mana leech for spells. In fact, this is also true in Period 1. The philosophy has always been that if you have leech, it should only be for attacks, and regen is for spells. And so it's currently the same true for Period 2. Which means this class is inherently tied to being an attack-based class that leeches mana from attacks. Right, because you can search, there's no mana leech anywhere. And mana regen, recoup, recovery, they're not the same. Okay, so now this points the class in a certain direction, right? Melee with mana. Sure. It's an option. Not necessary. Now, this node here, I mean, in theory, it should be good, but in practice, it's a bit broken right now. I think it's an oversight. My best guess is going to be changed because it currently doesn't really function behind this node here. So ways to alleviate this. Well, unfortunately, I could only think of one way, and that is to use the corrupted belt that has your mana counted as full at 104%. This means you're constantly overleeching mana to also leech ES, but not confirmed. The downside of this is that you can't recharge Energy Shield, but because of the proximity of Monk to Eternal Youth, you do have some sort of recovery besides only leech, so that's not too big a deal normally. Next up, Chayula's Gift. This is actually one of the stronger nodes in the tree. So this basically caps your Chaos Res to 85 as long as you have, I believe, 36% Chaos Res. That can be, let's say, an Amethyst Ring with a 20% Chaos Res. That's capped. I have 23 here and 16 here. That's what I have. Capped. Done. Very good node. 2 points. Excellent node. Now, before we go into the rest, let's talk about Ascendancy. Ascendancies are considered a multiplier to everything else. As Mark says, you got your gear multiplied by your passive tree, which is then multiplied again by your Ascendancy. Now, before I go over the rest of these, I want to let you have a quick question. Okay. If you have 100 base lightning damage, right? And then you also have 500% increased lightning damage. And then you have 10% gain as. Do you think you gain this much or this much? So, for example, here's 100 lightning damage and here's 500 lightning damage after times 500% multiplied. So 500% increase, let's say 600% increased damage. Do you think this 10% gain is of this or this? If you answered this, you are wrong. It's 10% gain of base damage. And this makes it so when you scale damage in Period 2 with gain as, unless you have generic damage that applies to everything, for example, attacks, it's all attacks, proj, yeah, these all apply to everything you gain. So gain becomes increased by this. But in the case of Chayula, all the gain as in this class is chaos damage. Now, this is very cool thematically, right? And it's very interesting. But what's the problem? Problem is, only generic attack damage effects gain as chaos. So if you want to build this character, and I mean, we look back into the typical monk playstyle with quarter staves, so the pigeonholed kind of ascendancy, you're usually going lightning. There's lots of lightning here. Lightning, maybe frost, right, or cold, but not really for chaos. So you then pigeonholed into scaling damage that is generic, such as, you know, spell damage into kind of eyes, or just attack damage with a block, right? Just something that gives generic damage. So why is it also an issue? Well, from my testing, it appears that damage is gained off your base weapon first, before conversion, and then before other multipliers. So since I'm using a base Fizz Spear, right, I'm gaining percent of this before all multipliers have to lightning damage and so on. So in theory, right, this average here on Wiki is 20%, but I think on PUB it's like 7%. I think I'll pull it up real quick. So here's PUB. Here, this node gives me on average about 10% damage, even though in theory it's about 20% on average. So it's at the half efficiency approximately. That's not the thing though. I'm scaling so much generic damage that makes it viable. But if you're playing Chayula and you're not doing this stupid shenanigans I'm doing right now, going for all this generic damage, it will be very difficult to scale this to a reasonable degree. If you stick around in this area here, you're left with the choice of, you know, splitting your points between chaos damage and also AD damage, right? Because there's not that much attack damage here. And, well, that's something to consider. Now, moving on into the breach. So this is a skill I think has much more place in the early game. But in practice, what happens is that you're going out of your way to pick up buffs that don't last long enough to affect your next kill, right? For me, this is not only borrowed power, but bad borrowed power. So in this game, you move very slowly, right? If I kill pack here, right, walk over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Long time. I have 30 movement speed boots too. So the duration and effect can be doubled, but now you're spending a lot of points just to pick up little flames that give you, again, added as chaos, which isn't inherently bad, but it's not quite the multiplier you might expect, right? And, well, next up. Oh, before we move on, let's talk about penetration, right? If you have, let's say, elemental penetration, well, you also can't pen chaos. If you have elemental reduction, you can't also reduce chaos. So, again, in theory, it doesn't quite work out as efficiently as one might expect from an ascendancy point, let alone 4 points. Okay, next up, Embrace Darkness. This, I actually really looked into it because I thought it was really interesting. Now, taking the backbone of the class as mana, right, and it says damage for a life or energy shield, I think this is really interesting because you can take this, right? I'll just I don't care. Darkness, there you go. Because it's before life or ES, and you have mind over matter, right? This means that damage goes to mana first, then life, but then darkness protects life. So in the end, you can keep darkness at maximum before you while you have mana, right? Which is really good. That's great synergy. I like that. Pretty cool. What isn't cool is that you have no spirits. Currently, Period 2 pretty much mandates spirits in one form or another. Classes typically have combo skills interactions that require spirit. For example, currently, Lightning Spear. Well, Lightning Spear, it needs frenzy charges. How do you get frenzy charges? Well, you need combat frenzy. Okay, if you're getting power charges, I think the other way to get power charges if you're playing monk, monk skills. You know? So I think currently the crippling restriction is too strict, and I reckon it's probably better to have like a either max spirit or less spirit rather than no spirit. It is just too brutal. Now again, leaning into the chaos philosophy, gaining damage as chaos, great. In fact, this gives me 40%, almost 45%, 46% gained as extra chaos. And when you hear that, you go, oh shit, that's a lot of damage. That's a 1.5 times multiplier. Well, is it? Is it really though? 18% increased damage, not 1.5 times damage, right? Or 1.46 times. Again, because the way scaling works, it only gains damage of base damage before any other scalers, right? If you invest everything to lightning, you don't gain the max lightning damage you have, you gain base lightning damage, and then has no multipliers, right? So, in theory, it's very rough. And then, again, lastly, this final note here. Does a single person pick this note in the entire game? Actually, I'm not sure. And Inner Silence. So why do I think Inner Silence is rough? Is because, well, currently, as I mentioned earlier with the endgame in PoE, it is almost impossible to not take damage constantly, right? Meaning that if you don't take Eldritch Battery, Might of Matter, your darkness is almost guaranteed to be 0. So, and that's also at all times, right? I like the idea where darkness is your last lifeline. I think that's really cool. So mana or life is first, and then when you reach 0 life, you hold on to your darkness, right? Darkness keeps you alive. I think that's really cool. And currently, it's actually the other way around. And I'm just wondering, like, maybe this should become the final lifeline, you know? So if you take AB Mana of Mana, it does work like that. It does. And I liked it a lot. But even then, these two nodes are simply, I wouldn't say useless, honestly. Because, remember, it's always an opportunity cost here. We're paying 2 points here. 2 points is a lot. And that's what you get? I think it should be better. This should be changed to something else. 100%. And then, if you think there's more? No, that's it. That's all there is to this class. So, it's a class that is locked to attacks, inherently. Has chaos damage scaling, but doesn't scale with chaos, or doesn't scale in general, right? To gain damage as chaos, you need to both have chaos investment and wither and stuff like that, as well as your base damage of another type, right? So inherently, you're splitting your damage up into multiple damage types with different pens, different resistances, areas, and so on. It's just inefficient. It's cool, but inefficient. And then Into the Breach in endgame is functionally some free aura support. Now, if I had suggestions, without changing the identity of the class, keeping it relatively the same, immediately, I would change these two nodes to work with each other. Currently, they do not work with each other, which is an oversight, right? This is really good. I think this is fine. Perhaps Instant Nature is also good, but I like the idea of mana on some class rates. Also, recovers ES is cool. I think it should be either split into Mana Leech also applies to Energy Shield Leech. So they're separated and you can have both at the same time. That's, or this note here becomes, you know, unreserved mana doesn't stop leech. So over leech mana, which I think is also really cool, right? Really cool. This note here, I think this is good. It's very powerful. One of the better notes in the game, for sure. This note here, so adding damage to chaos is cool. However, I think there needs to be something else on the tree, on the ascendancy, that allows you to amplify, change, magnify chaos damage based on other damage types. At least in the current state of the game, getting chaos damage to a reasonable level is very rough. And you can't scale two things at the same time, which is now you're diverging into two pathways, right? Not good. As mentioned earlier, I think the easiest way to solve this is to do make it so the spirit isn't so backbreaking, and make it so that your darkness is now your final lifeline. You know, that really becomes like the epitome of darkness, right? You lost all your life, all your mana, but then darkness keeps you alive at the end for just a little bit longer. I think that's really cool. And honestly, these two nodes, they should be gone. They should be just ripped away and gone to something new, because these just don't do anything. So, I mean, ideas would be, let's say we had a modifiers to damage also apply to chaos, or pen also applies to chaos. You know, any damage applies wither, something like that, etc. Something a bit unique, something a bit of a multiplier. Because, you know, if you compare this to, let's say, well, Huntress, it's just multiplier over multiplier over multiplier everywhere. More damage. Exceed criticals, you know. Life leech on elemental, you know, just doubled, right? Added as accuracy, you know, just incredible multiplying scaling. But Chayula is like, hello, I got a little bit of extra chaos and that's it, you know. So I think some sort of a real power become from these nodes here instead of these. Now, speaking about the campaign experience, I would say the current iteration of Embrace Darkness actually is very good for campaign, right? Having an extra, I think it was 500 darkness during the campaign, it was really good during bosses, at the cost of all your spirit, right? And remember, during the campaign, you only have 2 points, maybe 4 points. I had 4 points. So darkness here, and I think I had chaos rest here. I can't remember. And this helped a lot with bossing. So it has its place in the campaign, but in the end game, maybe not. That's my thoughts on Chayula. Obviously, we all know it's weak, right? This is my opinions on it. I like to play somewhat of off meta-ish style. Now I know you go, okay, you playing Lightning Spear. It's a meta skill. Yeah, I get it. But I was playing Lightning Spear before it became meta. So you can't loop me in, you know? You can't loop me in. So I find that ascendancies in period 2, and also skills as well, are so pigeonholed into a playstyle that a developer has chosen for you. You can't choose to play your class or skill very far from the intended design. So, examples, right? Lightning Spear requires frenzy charges, right? That's fine. So does Stormlands to do efficient damage. So how do you get frenzy charges? Well, one obvious solution is casting shock with Assassin's Mark, right? Assassin's Mark. Oh, it's a Sniper's Mark, right? This gets you charges on crits, but You can't build crits unless you're an Amazon, right? You're pretty much locked out of critical unless you're Amazon. Simply because of the way critical scales in this game. It's far too difficult, right? Next up, Frenzy Charge from other sources, right? So I need to use Common Frenzy, Herald Thunder, mandatory, right? To sometimes give me Frenzy Charges, not always. Now these skills gave me Frenzy Charges in pack-to-pack clear, but not in situations that really want me to get Frenzy Charges, such as bossing and difficult rares. So in this situation, when I need charges the most, I can't get them. Now you go, well, what about disengaging? Well, unfortunately, you cannot parry with any other shield besides a buckler. Now you locked out of that avenue of charge generation. Yeah, maybe in the future there'll be more charges, but currently it's very, very rough. I also dislike this part a lot because I find that it's very hard to find something slightly astray that's also unique and interesting, and that has really hampered my experiences with build creation in this game. Also, I want to go over finally my Primal Strikes. I get that the Final Strike is cool, right? But consuming shocks, in fact, reduced your damage. Okay. Reducing your damage for your last final hits, to me, is counter to what the real oomph, right? If I remove a shock that I invested all the shock into, it feels bad, right? It feels bad. And that's pretty much it. That's I gonna be my gear, and I'll see you guys in QE1 event number 3. Necrosaddles, Freshia number 3. Alright, bye.